Not to be hyperbolic, but if statements are really the backbone to most logic-driven macros. If statements drive the script decision-making process and allow macros to become as simple or as complex as desired. In this video, I'll outline if statements and how to use them to make your macros more dynamic and malleable. This will be broken down into simple if statements, nested if statements, and else if statements. Simple if statements. Simple if statements offer Excel a decision to evaluate. These statements can be as simple as determining if a cell has data or if the data is greater than or less than a specific value. As you become more well-versed using VBA, your if statements will also grow in complexity, where evaluation may be used for error handling or checking if multiple criteria have been met. Let's first discuss Excel's if formula to help guide us. The if formula first asks for the requirements to be tested. In this case, let's say it's if cell T14 is greater than or equal to 250. The next requirement for the formula is the value of the cell if true. Said another way, it's asking what do you want the cell to calculate if cell T14 is greater than or equal to 250. We're just going to add the text cell T14 is greater than or equal to 250. You can also use this as a calculation. The last statement in the if formula is the value you want to return if the question is not true. Again, you can make this as simple or as complex as you want. VBA if statements follow the same premise as outlined. The first requirement is the criteria we are testing. We write the criteria between the if and then factors. In this case, let's test to see if a cell is blank. We will write if selection equals, 2 quotation marks, then, and then in a new line, write end if to close the if statement. If we run this script, nothing will happen because we haven't told Excel what to do with the selection when it's blank. We need to place that information between the start and the end of the if statement. In this case, let's create a message box that alerts us that the selected cell is blank using the message box function. Okay, great. So we're now 2/3 of the way through a simple if statement. We have the test criteria and we have the if true criteria. Now let's add what to do when the test is not valid, where there is data in a selected cell. To do this, we will add an else line followed by VBA instructions on what to do. Again, let's use the message box function to say data in cell. All right, there you go. You've just written your first if statement. Now, this test may seem simple and maybe even a little dumb, but you can easily use this macro when creating a template that needs certain information to be entered. Think about online user forms requiring certain data to be entered before proceeding to the next page. Nested if statements. Sometimes a single logical question just isn't enough to meet the requirements of complex model logic. What are you supposed to do? Create hundreds of if statements for all possible test criteria? You can simply nest if statements inside each other to create complex decision trees that your model can easily follow. Experienced Excel users are probably familiar with the concept of nested if statements. For those unfamiliar, let's talk it through before explaining it. There are plenty of times you use complex decision trees in day-to-day life. So much so, you probably don't realize you're using multiple decision points to come to a conclusion. Let's pretend you want to catalog your neighborhood pets by size. To keep it simple, let's pretend your neighborhood only has cats and dogs, and the size of a large cat is going to be very different than the size of a large dog. In this decision tree, the first question we will ask is whether the animal is a cat or a dog. If it's a dog, let's ask if it weighs more than 50 pounds, and if it's a cat, let's ask if it weighs more than 10 pounds, which we will call large. Asking those questions gets us to 4 outcomes. 1, a large dog. 2, a small dog. 3, a large cat. 4, a small cat. Nested if statements work the same way. The outcome of the first question is going to affect the next question asked. Once you understand how to write if statements, nesting if statements are incredibly easy. You simply place a complete if statement after the correct statement. The pet cataloging example would look something like this. Make sure your end if statements are located in the correct sections, otherwise you will cause errors. One way to easily nest if statements is to create each if statement separately and then copy and paste them into the correct area of the parent if statement. In our example, let's test if cell C3 has the letters RB. We will start using the same syntax as before. If sheets summary dot range C3 equals RB, then, followed by 2 spaces and the end if closing the statement. Then we enter instructions if the cell does have RB. In this instance, let's change the color of the table. We will do that using the cells.interior property. To make the text more legible, we will adjust the font color too using the following code. For instances where this statement is not true, let's say we want the cells of the table to have white backgrounds and black text. We will enter else followed by range table1.cells.interior.colorindex equals XL none, and then range table1.cells.font.colorindex equals 1. Running backs will now have a special formatting for their pages. Let's add a secondary if statement for running backs who have more than 200 fantasy points in the 2018 season. When they have more than 200 points, let's bold and italics the fantasy points row. We'll start by introducing the if statement. If sheets summary.range T13 is greater than 200, then adding 2 lines before entering else, adding another 2 lines, and adding end if. When the running back has more than 200 points, we will format the cells to be bold and italic using the following code. When it's not true, let's remove any prior formatting using this code. Else if statements. In my experience, else if statements tend not to be used as often as nested if statements. It is still important to review and remember this as an option if you do come across an else if statement while editing or reviewing someone else's code. Else if statements are used to handle 2 sets of questions in a single if statement. We will modify the code to format the table for running backs for this example. You'll notice this is very similar to creating a nested if statement. Adding an else if statement is like asking a secondary question when the first statement is false. For instance, let's check if cell C3 is QB. We will place 2 spaces before the current else statement to work with. First, we will write else if as one word, followed by our statement to evaluate. Here, it will be sheets summary dot range C3 equals QB, and finish it with a then. Let's tweak the running back logic to create a new set of colors for quarterbacks. We'll change the interior color to 25 and the font color to 2. When you look at your statements, you should have 4 statements to conclude the else if statement. First, we have the if statement, followed by the else if, followed by else, and ending with end if. This will cover all possible results for the 2 questions asked. Now, think about some work you currently do and how you can turn your daily decision points into logical statements that VBA can evaluate. What information would you need to know to properly evaluate those decisions? How many nested if statements would you need to get to the correct decision? And is there any way that you can streamline this decision tree down? These questions can help define if a process can be automated.